I was just curious. Like at some point, it's going to be where like being around your parents. I just didn't know if they did he was yelling things in the coach about me.
Kyle, where are you standing?
this way, but I've been enjoying myself and just
Teaching?
sure, just learning more about it myself, as I really haven't spent a whole lot of time especially these last 6 chapters. Again, I know I've repeated this, but first 6 chapters are historic, last 6 are mainly prophetic. But in that we're going to see some prophecy, but that is also enmeshed in history. And, I've kind of harped on some of the history that we've seen that is not technically in the secular history books. So a lot of scholars will dispute the legitimacy of Daniel and all these things, but the prophecy that we're going to get in Daniel 11 is actually things that are in history books that are verifiable through secular history. So it kind of bolsters the word even more. And then we're coming off of Daniel 9, we talked about last week, where the prophecy of Jesus, where many believe is predicted of Jesus' arrival in Jerusalem, declaring himself king on that day. And again, we're going to try to cover these 3 chapters tonight, and they kind of flow together. And that's how a lot of these chapters are taught all as one. And so basically a simple short outline. Chapter 10 is going to explain the vision beforehand. It's kind of building up to the vision. 11 is the vision itself. And then chapter 12 is kind of the postscript, kind of give you some summary notes there at the end. So like I said, we've got a lot. We're not going to go through because 11 is pretty long, so we're going to kind of jump around a little there. But we'll hit the high points. Starting in Daniel 10, and I went with the King James Version. I just felt like it was, I don't know, to me it just worded things better for me. It seems weird because I don't think I've ever said that. I don't think I've ever chosen to go with the KJV, but here we are. So 10 says, in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a thing was revealed unto Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar, and the thing was true, but the time appointed was long, and he understood the thing and had understanding of the vision. Okay, and then this is King Cyrus's, the same King Cyrus whose army was the one that overthrew Belshazzar, not to be confused with Belteshazzar, who is Daniel, but Belshazzar, the knight that God wrote on the wall. It was King Cyrus's army who came in. He's mentioned, multiple times throughout the Old Testament. I think Ezra, he comes up a lot. And he was actually known as being friendly towards the Jews. And he was the one who actually allowed them to return to Jerusalem. Because remember, Daniel was told you would remain in Babylonian for 70 years, and your people would be allowed to return. And Cyrus is the one who does that. So 2 says, in those days, I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. Just, so I tried to figure out, I don't know, what just kind of perked my interest when I read that, and I was trying to figure out why he was mourning. There's not a really good answer. We don't really know exactly why he was mourning, but the indication is that it was a sad mourning, not just like, not like a happy, because they're getting to go home. So some people speculate that, he was mourning just this transition that was going to take place, so that was going to be very hard on his people, and it was, just mourning for them and what they were going to have to go through. Anyway, 3 says, I ate no pleasant bread, neither came flesh nor wine in my mouth, neither did I anoint myself at all, till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. And in the 4th and 20th day of the 1st month, as I was at the side of the great river, which is the Hiddekel, or the Tigris River, then I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz, I think. Uphaz was actually a location where it was known to just be plentiful with gold, very fine gold, some of the best gold that's ever been found. And then it says his body was like the beryl. And beryl is another mineral. It's known for its beauty. You've seen it. You've probably seen it before, but didn't know the name, or I didn't anyway. And it says, in his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude, And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men that were with me saw not the vision, but a great quaking fell upon them, so that they fled to hide themselves. So we got a really good description of this person here that's kind of interacted with Daniel here. And just to keep things in perspective, I think around this time they're thinking he's on up in his years, probably in his 80s. We kind of said last week he chose not to go back to Jerusalem, but he's going to stay in his position there in Babylonia. But what about this particular description? What stands out? Anything jump out at you? It just seems I don't know, the word comes to mind, it's powerful. Just almost like electric. Maybe that's the lightning part of the description, jumping out at me. But somebody else that, can you think of, because he says, he was able to see the man, but the people that were with him could not see him. And it reminded me, it kind of sounds like Saul on the road to Damascus, where he has that interaction or that encounter with Jesus, and the people that were with him couldn't hear him. So it's the same kind of situation going on here. 8 goes on to say, therefore I was left alone and saw this great vision, and there remained no strength in me, for my comeliness was turned me into corruption, and I retained no strength, yet heard I the voice of his words, and when I heard the voice of his words, then was I in a deep sleep on my face, and my face toward the ground, and behold, a hand touched me, which set me upon my knees and upon the palms of my hands. So it's literally this angelic being, or whatever this is, has literally having a physical effect on Daniel, causing him to bow down, and I just think of those descriptions of when God makes His presence known, and it forces you to drop to your feet, and just in the awe of His magnificence. I think that's a pretty awesome thought. But who do y'all think this was? Like, what is your personal opinion? Think it was just an angel? So where I'm going with this is, you've heard of theophanies, right? Where Jesus, it's like an appearance of Jesus before He was, incarnate, made man. And some would say that they think that this was a theophany. I don't know for sure. I don't have a solid or a strong opinion one way or the other, but I can see where you would get that just from the road to Damascus thing I pointed out, that was Jesus that interacted with Paul there. And then just the descriptions that we get, because if you go and look back at the experiences with Gabriel, who was an angel, Daniel had those experiences with Gabriel the first time.
Very familiar. So he was very familiar with Gabriel and probably others.
Yeah.
It's weird that it would be described in this manner of he has no clue what's going on.
Yeah.
If not something.
And it's like this being was better,
Yeah.
or greater, or more powerful. Because the first experience he had with Gabriel, he said, while Daniel was watching the vision and trying to understand it, there before me stood one who looked like a man. I heard a man's voice calling Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of the vision. As he came near the place where I was standing, I was terrified and fell prostrate. Now he was terrified and fell prostrate, but we still didn't get this, eyes of lightning and all the voice of multitude and all that. We don't get those same sorts of descriptions. It seems like this person or being is a little bit more elevated. So, if this was Jesus, what does it say about His presence? We've kind of been all over this, but we also get a lot of this sort of similar imagery in Revelations. It's a lot of the same kind of stuff, and I mentioned last week how these books kind of intertwine, and it's they almost flow together. It's pretty interesting. He's also not given a name here. Most of the angels that are come in to make appearances are given a name. We got Michael, Gabriel. I can't think of anybody else right offhand, but you're typically given the name of the angel. So anyway, it's just something to ponder upon. 11 goes on to say, and he said unto me, O Daniel, a man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak unto thee, and stand upright. For unto thee am I now sent. And when he had spoken this word unto me, I stood trembling. And so there, like a side point, well, it's not really a side point because it's all part of the scripture, but what does the word beloved mean to you?
Greatly loved.
Greatly loved.
The NLT
I was gonna
says,
say, it says precious.
Yeah.
Precious. Yeah. You know, it's a word it's I don't know, it's a feel good word to me. You know, when you hear that word, it's like,
important.
man, it's
Someone,
beloved. Yeah. Well, I was also thinking like a kind of an old English person or something. Beloved.
To me, it's more
I
like
was thinking
a,
Shakespeare.
Yeah.
to me, it's more of like an affirmed position. Like it's, I mean, you know, I think it's easy for us to say that our parents love us, but, you know, being a beloved, it's different.
It's maybe a little deeper. Or
Yeah.
a little more.
And it's, to me, it's much more stable. It's much more, it's,
Yeah. So kind of the way I thought about it is God loves all of his children, all humans, but there are only some that are beloved, right? That are in his will, that are his children, that have given themselves to him and died to themselves to him. So that's kind of what I think of as the beloved, is the people that are in the fold, you know, that are in this inclusive, exclusive club of ours that we have. So it's found throughout the Bible, the word beloved, and Daniel is referred to as beloved 3 times in the book here. I like this description. It says, all those adopted in God's family through faith in the finished work of Jesus Christ are beloved by the Father. It is an amazing, lavish love. See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God, and that is what we are. It's 1 John. Because God has shed his love on us, we are free to apply the words of Song of Solomon 6:3 to our relationship with Christ. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. I just love that word. And Spurgeon says, I know of no greater blessing than can happen to any man and woman here than to be assured by the Spirit of God that they are greatly beloved of the Lord. Something we should see.
you know, talking about that reminds me, I mean, you and I briefly talked about Sunday school and you know, what our class is going to do, but we haven't really gotten into any kind of depth, but, you know, I'm starting to come up with some lessons for Henry Nouwen's Life of the Beloved. And that's what you just said, I was going to say before you said it, you know, what Henry Nouwen is saying is that, you know, part of us being, you know, being the beloved children of God is we have to take part in becoming that. Like, because you said we should aspire to be that. And what he's kind of saying is that there are some things that we have to do with, you know, within our faith, maturing as Christians to become that. And it's not like it's a lottery of who becomes one and who doesn't. And I think that's pretty awesome. It's
I
not
thought
like
about
it's
that too, that you were going to do that study. Funny how that works out sometimes. So 12 goes on to say, then said he unto me, fear not. And that fear not, you know, I always like to point that out because it's a commandment. I think it speaks to our society now more than ever with the societal angst that is, you know, running things. Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand, and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. Talking about the archangel Michael. And I remained there with the kings of Persia. Now I am come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days, for yet the vision is for many days. And when he had spoken such words unto me, I set my face toward the ground, and I became dumb. And behold, one like the similitude of the sons of men touched my lips. Then I opened my mouth and spake, and said unto him that stood before me, O my Lord, by the vision my sorrows are turned upon me, and I have retained no strength. And when it talks about this sorrows and this, he's interacting with Archangel Michael at this point, but he says, David Guzik, commentator, says, because of the vision of my sorrows have overwhelmed me. And he points out that the ancient Hebrew word translated to sorrows has the thought of a twisting or a writhing pain, and it is often used in several places in the Old Testament for labor pains and childbirth. So Daniel was so severely affected by this vision that he was given that he could barely breathe, much less could he deal with the prophetic complexities. I mean, there was a lot of stuff put on Daniel, and what a special person he had to be to receive this. And even you'll see that Daniel is like, I don't know what's going on, and what do I make of this? But you just get this genuine sense of he's like overwhelmed almost. But that's temporary. 17 goes on to say, for how can the servant of this my Lord talk with this my Lord? For as for me, straightway there remained no strength in me, neither is there breath left in me. Then there came and touched me one like appearance of a man, and he strengthened me, and said, O man, greatly beloved, fear not, peace be unto thee, be strong, yea, be strong. And when he had spoken unto me, I was strengthened, and said, Let my Lord speak, for thou hast strengthened me. Then said he, Knowest thou wherefore I come unto thee, and now will I return to fight with the prince of Persia? And when I am gone forth, lo, the prince of Greece shall come, but I will shew thee, which is noted in the scripture of truth, and there is none that holdeth with me in these things but Michael, your prince. And Michael, there's actually like a lot of information out there about him, the Archangel Michael. He's thought to specifically be responsible for protecting Israel. That's why his name pops up. I think he's in Jude and he's in Revelation as well. But we get this sense that as an archangel, I'm not anywhere close to being super in tune with angels and what all they do as far as
The ranking
kingdom and
system,
everything.
the hierarchy of angels.
Yeah, there you go. But a lot of the stuff I read was talking about that there is like this hierarchy, and it's even believed that angels are assigned to even geographic locations or groups of people, which I thought was interesting because I've never really heard that. 11, now this is where we start to get into some of the most accurate prophecy probably found in the Bible, and this is where I was talking about. It covers about 375 years of history that has already happened, and then talks about some events that are yet to come. It also is the same history that's found in secular history. So we're going to hit on some people that they're not really named by name per se, but there's really no other way it could be anybody different. So we have a pretty good idea of who they're talking about, and there's just like we talked about Antiochus Epiphanes last week. There are so many different documentaries out there about that guy because there's so much material on him. But anyway, Paul, and one thing I wanted to point out that, and I love this, Paul says in Romans 3, because again, when this is one of the books that the scholars or the doubters, the critics will point to and say there's no way Daniel was written, before this history took place, because it's impossible for somebody to know all these details and get them all right. But what they're really saying is that means that there really is a God, and I don't want there to be a God, so I have to try to tear this down. But Paul says in Romans 3, let God be true and every man a liar. And I think that's something that you just have to remember sometimes, that let the Bible and the Word be true and every man a liar. And just you got to be very careful. I try to be very careful when I'm looking at things and try to get multiple sources. We just have to be careful sometimes. even people that, you know, call themselves Christians sometimes, and I'm not picking on anybody, but I try to be, try to pick through and weed through what's accurate, and I think we should all do that. So the first 11 starts off, it says, also I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm, to strengthen him, and now will I shew thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength through the riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia or Greece. And so this 4th Persian king they're talking about is Xerxes. We've all heard of Xerxes, right? I think he was in 300. Wasn't that he was the bald guy that was getting carried around? Yeah, so that guy. 3 says, and a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. This is actually talking about Alexander the Great. We've all heard of him in the history classes. He was actually a Grecian king who we know established a vast empire in a very short amount of time, and was known as one of the great, if not the greatest of all time, generals, warlords. I don't know if you call him a warlord, but you get the point. He was known for being one of the greatest leaders of all time. He was very young when he was doing all these crusades or campaigns, if you want to call them. So he died at 32 years of age of a fever after a drunken party in Babylon. I guess this was something that was kept in the history books that has been kept over the years. And this prophecy, it does not, this is the commentary says, prophecy does not mainly concern Alexander because he did no harm to Jerusalem, though he conquered the general area. And the ancient historian Josephus, I'm sure a lot of us have heard of him, records the interesting arrival of Alexander the Great into Jerusalem and how he was shown the book of Daniel by the high priest, whom Alexander had previously seen in a vision. So, Alexander comes into town, into Jerusalem. He claims he had this vision, and the guys he's met with were like, we think this is you here in the book of Daniel, written down.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah. And again, this is not, I heard multiple commentators giving this same thing, and I was like, that would be really crazy. Alexander was so impressed that he spared Jerusalem and granted its religious toleration. And some people would even credit him in the way that he established Grecian culture and Greek culture as being, he laid such a good foundation for the spreading of the gospel. Because what he did was he basically wanted everybody to learn Greek, so that way that, well, he wanted to take over parts of the world ultimately, but what it did, one of the cool things it did was a lot of people were familiar with Greek, so they were able to read, parts of the Bible. They were able to understand the missionaries that would go out and speak. So it's actually kind of, again, this is all part of God's plan. That's what we're talking about here. I think that's kind of another cool sidebar. 4 says, and when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion, which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others besides those. It's talking about when Alexander died. When it says not to his posterity, it's talking about his descendants. He did leave, there are 3 possible heirs that were on record. He had a half-brother named Philip, who was actually mentally deficient. He had a son who was born after Alexander died, and then an illegitimate son named Hercules. So the half-brother and I always struggle with this word, posthumous,
Posthumous?
isn't that it? After death. Son, they were first designated co-monarchs with each with a regent, but fighting amongst the regents eventually resulted in the murder of all his possible heirs. So what ended up happening is that all the empire is split up among his top 4 generals. There's a north general or king, south, east, west, and then the 2 north and south are primarily discussed because they are the ones that are constantly fighting over the promised land, Jerusalem, in the middle,
Hmm.
which is still going on today. You know, that's what's another thing that is just so in your face. Everybody in the world recognizes that Jerusalem is a hotbed of, you know,
Contested
conflicts
land.
and all these issues, and yet, you know, they would still deny all this stuff. 5 says that the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion. His dominion shall have a great dominion. So this is talking about Ptolemy. He says Ptolemy had a prince named Seleucus, who rose to power and took over dominion of the region of Syria. He became more powerful than his former Egyptian ruler, and the Seleucids, you might have heard of them, are identified with the kings of the north, and the Ptolemies were the kings of the south. So the dynasties of the Seleucids and the Ptolemies fought for, you know, some 130 years. This is the north and south. The stronger of the two always held dominion over the Holy Land. They went back and forth, swapping power back and forth. 6 says, and in the end of the years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. It sounds just like some movie, you know, where they take their daughter and they try to make amends, or they try to make a peace treaty with their daughter and just ship them off. It's come to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. So, but this is talking about the daughter of the king of the south shall go to the king of the north to make an agreement, and this was fulfilled in the marriage between Antiochus II, who is of the Seleucids, and Bernice, or Berenice. It looks like Bernice with an extra E in there. So she's a daughter of Ptolemy. There was a peace for a time because of this marriage, but it was upset when Ptolemy died. Again, these are historical things that are recorded on both sides of the aisle. So, and it's in our Bible. I don't know how you get around that anymore. They said that the part about shall not retain power or authority. Once Ptolemy II died, Antiochus put away Bernice and took back his former wife. As you can imagine, this didn't go well. Neither he nor his authority shall stand. That part talks about his former wife didn't trust her husband at this point, so she had him poisoned. He brings her back, she poisons him, she shall be given up. That part's talking about after the murder of Antiochus, the upset wife, the scorned woman, had Bernice and her infant son and her attendants killed. And then after this reign of terror, her name is Laodice, I don't know if I'm saying that right, set her son Seleucus on the throne of the Syrian dominion, which is the northern kingdom. Again, this whole book, this whole chapter just covers a lot of these different things, and they go back and forth. And we're gonna jump down to 21, because this is the crescendo, if you will, of people that's going to come along. And we talked about last week Antiochus Epiphanes being the precursor to the Antichrist. And so this is kind of where he comes into play. 21 says, and in his estate he shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flattery. So what is that saying? He's not like a natural rightful heir, you know, as it would be like one of the Ptolemy's sons to take over. It would be, what they believe happened is Seleucus III, they strongly suspect that he murdered, or they suspect Antiochus murdered his older brother to get in there and into power. And then it says that the other potential heir, the son of Seleucus III, was imprisoned in Rome at the time. So it talks about, you know, he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. He just kind of slips in there. Now it says, aside from the murder, it did use terror to gain power. He used flattery, smooth promises, and intrigue. We'll talk about some of those promises he makes. It says that he flattered Eumenes, king of Pergamus, and Attalus, his brother, and got their assistance. He flattered the Romans. He sent ambassadors to court of their favor. He would pay them in arrears of the tribute. So he was just playing this politicking game where he was just paying people off, gaining favor with these people. Then Antiochus IV, he takes over, he takes the title of Antiochus Epiphanes, which Epiphanes means illustrious. He's calling himself, illustrious great, Alexander the Great. It's kind of along those same lines. But he also became known as Epimanes. Have you ever heard of Antiochus Epimanes? But that actually means madman because of all the things that he did, and he was a madman. So jump down to 27. So in both of these kings' hearts shall be set to do mischief, and that they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. So there's this famous battle where the Roman navy actually defeats the navy of Antiochus Epiphanes. He was known to have a very good navy. The Roman navy beats him. After the battle, the Roman general draws a circle around Antiochus in the dirt, demands him to know if he would surrender and pay tribute to Rome. And he told him he had to give him an answer before he stepped out of that circle. So from that point on, Antiochus was basically serving the Roman Empire. So as you can imagine, a guy like this, very prideful, didn't take this too well. So when he goes to head home, tuck tail and go home, he basically gets word that Jerusalem is celebrating his downfall, if you will. And this is when he goes on this just terror against the Jewish people. He hated them. He hated everything about them. And which it's just evident through his actions that he does. So when he returns from Egypt, the bitter defeat, he vented his anger against Jerusalem. He persecuted the Jewish people to conform to Greek culture. He was forsaking their faith and the traditions of their fathers. 31 goes on to say, and the arm shall stand apart on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that make desolate. Now, last week we talked about the abomination of desolation. Jesus speaks of it in Matthew. This is kind of like a sign of the end. Antiochus Epiphanes sets up an image of Zeus at the temple altar, and we're talking about in David's temple and in the big temple in Jerusalem. He sets up an image of Zeus. He demands sacrifices to these images. He desecrates the temple by sacrificing the pig on it. It was a true abomination which brought a desolate condition to the temple. For now, no one could come to worship at all. I mean, it was just such an affront to God to go into his temple. So he knew how important this was to his people and to do this to them. Not only that, but he killed 80,000 of them, and he took about 40,000 to prison as prisoners. He sold another 40,000 into slaves. He plundered the temple, and they speculate he probably robbed about $1 billion from the town. As I said, he's the precursor to the final Antichrist. And so I think what they're trying to tell us, or what God's trying to tell us through this part about Antiochus is this is kind of what it's going to look like in those last days. This is how this person is going to react. This is how they're going to act. Jesus told us about it in Matthew 25:15. Paul talks about it in Thessalonians. Paul says, "Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed. The man of sin being Antichrist, and the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God." And once I think it'll be kind of obvious we shouldn't be here, but it should be obvious if you picked up a Bible and started studying this stuff, maybe in the Great Tribulation, if this person is in the temple acting as if he's God, that's going to be a good sign that this is him, and this is towards the end. Let's jump down to 39. 39 says, "Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. What do y'all think what is meant by a strange God? And this is talking about Antiochus again. It's pure speculation on my part, but I think there's going to be some sort of image, some sort of God or something put forth that he is going to, Antichrist will try to get us to worship. Not real sure what that looks like, but it'll be something odd, I feel like. Go down a little further, it talks about 44 says, "But the tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him, therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly make away many. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help." I thought that was really interesting. Where it's talking about he's literally going to come in and go to, and the glorious mountain, holy mountain is thought to be Mount Zion, and that he's going to go to the temple and establish or set up some sort of a temple right there. Again, probably as an affront to believers, and especially the Jewish people, and the two great seas it talks about, the Mediterranean and the Dead Sea. Again, I just think it's so cool how this stuff is, I don't want to say it's plainly obvious, but if you just do a little bit of research on it, it becomes pretty obvious what's going on, and that we have a good idea of what they're talking about. It says that at the end, though, it says, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. So that's the good news, right? After all this bad stuff that's going to happen or whatever. The good news is that his time will come to an end, and none shall help him. And I don't know about y'all, but I get this sense that it's like he will be left abandoned. We talked about Antiochus being known as a madman against by the Jewish people. I think that's probably what's going to happen to Antichrist. He'll come in with flattery. He'll win people over. He'll be known as a winner. All these things, and then he'll start getting kind of more and more crazy, and he'll eventually get to the point where he just loses it and loses everybody around him. Everybody will abandon him, and then he'll go away. And 12, last chapter is pretty short, I promise. And we've been covering a lot of ground. But this is pretty good stuff here. It talks about, so this is talking about Michael again. 12:1. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. So when it talks about this time of trouble, speaking of the great tribulation, and did you pick up that it says it will be worse than it's ever been seen? Think about like what the Jews have been through already. We were just told what Antiochus did, and he was one of these that just did torturous things to people. Awful. We know what Hitler did. This will be even worse. Again, it is slightly terrifying to think that it could be even worse on God's people. And then Revelation actually speaks of this period a lot, obviously, the tribulation. And then just a question, what does this last line mean when it talks about everyone that should be found written in the book?
Referring to the book of life that's in Revelation.
Yeah, I think so. I don't have a perfect answer, but I get some sense again that and I don't want to go down that Calvinist road too much, but there's God knows how history's gonna play out. He knows the end. And anyway, I don't want to drift off too far over there, but I definitely think it's talking about the book in Revelation. 2 goes on to say, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. So what's being spoken of here?
The dead will rise.
The what?
The dead will rise.
Yeah. You going to heaven? Hopefully.
Or
Or the
not.
3 says, and they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and that they that turn into the righteousness as the stars forever and ever. So what's he saying here? Now remember, to me the cool thing, I guess, this is in the Old Testament. Yeah, this kind of sounds like New Testament concepts, right? Talk about the heaven and earth, and a resurrected body, and this part about the turning many to righteousness, because and that's kind of a thing in Jewish culture. They're not known as being evangelical. We're told right here by Daniel, who's a staunch Jewish man, or it's been spoken to him from an angel that many to righteousness, many that turn many to righteousness are the stars forever and ever. And I saw something, I should have wrote it down. It was talking about how, there's so many references to Jesus being the light of the world, and this is talking about how you'll shine as stars forever and ever. Bringing people into the light, shining your light on them. I just think it's interesting that these are New Testament concepts found right here in the Old Testament. 4 says, but thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Now this is where it starts to me hitting close to home, and this is what part of the chapter that really intrigued me. So what do you guys think when you hear him say that? Like the part about many shall run to and fro, talking about the end of the days, and knowledge shall be increased. How can that be related to today's society, today's culture?
I mean, we've got the world at our fingertips. We've got plenty of access to knowledge.
More so than has ever been had before, right?
Yeah. And, as AI grows and it develops more and more, it's just going to, like technology has at this point, continue.
Yeah. So let's go to the running, the to and fro part, and this is where I found that some commentators differ a little bit on that part. Some say that the running to and fro is talking about a literal means of transportation, meaning like, and I heard somebody bring this up, like the rail systems that are being developed across the world that are talking about how you could go from, or was it Hong Kong to Sydney in like 20 minutes or something, and just all of this crazy fast travel, the rockets that are Elon Musk and Bezos are shooting off, and that sort of thing, and this guy looked at it as more of a literal, but others say it's running to and fro for knowledge. We're just trying to just constantly just fill our brains with knowledge. I think that's semi-accurate as well. And then some others say that it's seeking prophecy, that we're running to and fro seeking prophecy because we're looking around and we're going, this stuff's coming to fruition, which is kind of what we're doing here. We're looking at prophecy, just kind of looking around saying, that kind of looks like this, that. But talking about knowledge being increased, have you guys ever heard of the knowledge doubling curve? So it's like this concept where knowledge, only built upon itself, very slowly, and then it's just taken off like exponentially.
Yeah.
It's kind of related to Moore's law. If you're familiar with Moore's law with technology,
Yeah.
Moore's law is like the doubling of technology every.
Like in half the time of the previous or something like that?
Right. Like you remember all those pictures of the first computer was like what? Bigger than this church or something like that, and it couldn't do half the functioning or even a quarter or even just a little small bit of what our phones can do now.
And that's one thing, I saw it, I wonder if I can find it real quick. But I saw it was from the 1900s to now, and how quickly things have just, from
It's
the
probably the same thing, because
Yeah.
that's where it kind of started, with like the 1900s.
yeah,
And then it talked about how it's sped up, it's speeding up like faster than we can even,
right.
when you talk about like AI and that kind of stuff, like, the megabyte goes to the gigabyte to the terabyte to the petabyte, which is next, I remember when terabyte was new to me, I was back in megabyte, remember like cell phones first came out, I'm like, okay, I can kind of operate on that, I know generally what that means. Then gigabyte popped up, and then terabyte, and then next is the petabyte, and then it'll be on to the exabyte. Anyway, it's just, I think that that's what it's talking about. It's talking about the knowledge shall be increased. There's just so many things, and I think of the internet. Like, I literally think it could be talking about the internet, because knowledge is just put all right in on our phone. But notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say that wisdom will be increased. And I think that that's the biggest takeaway, is that knowledge will be increased, but wisdom will not. I don't know, there's something to be said about, it's almost like, it's like, what do you hear, what's the saying, ignorance is bliss. There is something to that not having the pressure of always having the answers right here, if that makes sense. Like, living a much simpler life, I think sometimes is appealing. Not that we should long for the past or romanticize it, but anyway. 5 says, then I, Daniel, looked and behold, there stood other two, the one on this side of the bank of the river and the other on that side of the bank. One said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, how long shall it be to the end of these wonders? So there's these two beings again. I do think it's interesting that one's standing above the waters. Again, I don't know if this is a theophany or whatever, like a foreshadowing to the other guy that walked on the waters, but anyway. 7 says, and I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever, that it shall be for a time, times and a half, which is 3.5 years. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. Talking about those final days in the tribulation. So it's also the 3.5 year referencing. It's mentioned in Revelations multiple times. They also call it the 1,260 days. If you see that number thrown around. Or if you divide by the Jewish calendar, 360 days, you get 3.5 years exactly. 8 says, and I heard, but I understood not. Then I said, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed to the time of the end. Daniel still wanting more information. What's going on? What's going to happen to my people? And God says, that's enough. I've given you everything that you need to know. 10 says, many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. Again, I feel this in my bones sometimes. In society issues and things that are going on. But this is talking about speaking of salvation. And then I put that I get the sense that there's going to be this gap between the wicked and the righteous that's going to grow wider and wider. When I say righteous, I mean like Christians and people that are God's children. And that wickedness will abound. That it'll just, like Romans 1 type stuff, like it'll just get worse and worse and worse. You hear in the news, and I've seen this minor attracted persons to where we're going to start normalizing. What it's going to do is try to normalize pedophilia. And
Sure.
I know that's more of an American issue, maybe not a global issue, but that's anyway. It's you see it here now. 1 Corinthians 1:18, one of my favorite verses of all times. it says, "For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved is the power of God." I think that is so true. It's just, those who don't believe, I don't know how to put it any more plainly, than those who don't believe in God don't get it. And it's so plain to see sometimes to us as believers that calling out something as bad behavior or wrong or evil or twisted, and then you have people that try to justify it. And it's,
Well, so like I've got, one of my coworkers has been a Navy fellow for 30 years, been doing this job for 30 years. And somebody said it best because they're, to take something from the Bible, they're still on milk, haven't moved on to solid food. And what somebody said was that they've had 30 first years. And it's like, yeah, they can't get past the things that they should have learned in year one, and they're 30 years into this career, coming to retirement, and they barely will find their way out of the paper bag.
yeah.
But in honesty, though, we see that in church.
Yeah.
You know, we see people that, and it doesn't matter, you know, young, old. It's not like trying to pick on old folks. It's no offense to you, Kyle. I don't mean that you were not. Anyway, even like pastors' kids that are, you know, might be exposed to things more than a kid that grew up in a split home with, you know, all these different situations. We see it where there's people don't understand. They don't get beyond. And to me, it's just a huge. It's a huge reason of why to attend a holiness church. Why is holiness, you know, such an important concept? Why is it so important for, you know, the articles of faith for it to be included in those things? You know, because without that, it's no offense to Baptists that believe in once saved, always saved, but it's like,
Yeah.
I have asked for forgiveness. I can go kill somebody and be okay. You know, because I've asked for forgiveness prior to.
Yeah.
So,
And to be fair, there's a lot of them that don't adhere to that, like, strict.
yeah.
There's a lot of them that don't.
But the problem is that they still haven't gotten the wisdom.
Yeah.
They're still struggling. They don't understand.
I don't know, that's something that's come up before. Anyway, that's another discussion for another day. 11 says, "And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days." Here we go again. The abomination of desolation. Jesus really had even brought this up, so this is going to be a very important sign. In Matthew, what Jesus said is, "Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place." Better watch out. The 1,290 days. I don't know what that's exactly in reference to. 12 says, "Blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1,305 and 30 days." I don't know why I couldn't just say 1,305. But again, I don't know exactly what that one is. "But go thou thy way to the end be, for thou shalt rest and stand in thy lot at the end of the days." And I think that's kind of going back to like God telling Daniel to, you know, that's it for now. That's all you're going to get. That's all you need to know. You're not going to know everything. We'll give you a little glimpse into history, enough to where you should know that I know what I'm doing, talking about, and that I do exist. And I think he's saying, and I think it is important when we're looking at prophecy, and it's so heavy. It's a lot to take on. And we can't get too caught up, and I tend to do this sometimes, get caught up in about, what about this, what about that, what about this, what does this number mean, this number, and this number, and this number, and you try to you'll just run yourself into the ground if you try to figure every little thing out, and it's important, you know what I'm saying, it's important, but don't obsess over it, I guess. And then I said, this is exciting and terrifying at the same time. It's exciting to read that God's word is true and that it's verifiable and that we don't just have a faith that is just purely a faith. That because we have evidence, we have historical evidence, we have archaeological evidence, which, it's pretty neat. And then again, we long for Jesus' return, but at the same time, we don't want to lose those left behind either. That's another one of those areas where, yeah, we want to be with Jesus and that, but we also don't want to leave behind anybody. We don't want to miss an opportunity. So what do we do with all this information, and why do we care? I kind of gave you my opinion on it. We'll just throw it all out there. What do we learn from Daniel? He's a pretty big guy.
Yeah, and I like in 10, this is part of verse 12, but where it said, since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. So, I mean, that verse just speaks so much. I mean, you know, have we set our mind, I mean, each little step along the way, and just the fact that, God hears us, and He sends whatever's needed,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Great point. Prayer was a big part of who Daniel was. I think that's a theme that kind of jumped out to me, was that he should always be in prayer, and he definitely had a connection that's probably not like anybody else. Anyway, that's Daniel. Sorry, I mean, I know there's going to be a lot. Went over a little bit. But, and next week, so we've been talking about doing Mere Christianity. Have y'all read that book?
I have not.
C.S.
Is it
Lewis.
close?
Mere
Mere
Christianity.
Christianity.
There's a podcast on
Do
it.
what?
Unreleased.
Yeah, yeah. We might use that. We might break that out. I don't know.
It's on the map.
Well, me and Caleb were going to do a podcast on it. We didn't finish. We started it. Yeah.
There's
About halfway
two. There's
through.
2 full ones ready to go. The third one never got recorded.
Yeah. So I've probably got like half the book outline and stuff, but it's just a really great. I would almost classify it as an apologetics book. I want to talk about it more, but I think we're going to do that for a little while as a Bible study. If y'all are interested. But if y'all want a book, I don't know if y'all do like the digital books or whatever. Pretty sure it's on Apple's book for like 99 cents. Or if you want me to just order a hard copy, we can get some of those too. If y'all want one. But it's not a super long book or anything, but I think it hits on so many great topics and he makes so many good points. And I think it almost gives you a blueprint to maybe appeal to a non-believer, because he starts off very secular and just kind of speaks to everybody and just kind of moves and warms them up. It's kind of that toad in the water effect. But anyway, we'll do that. Does anybody want to close us in prayer tonight?
Sure, I will.
Okay.
Lord,